Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Scotty Shaw, and today is day 12 of 40 Days of K. And the word is culture. I think one of the big things is we often think of culture as just, oh, here's a culture. People wear this or this and that music. But um, those are very small aspects of culture. As Coach K says here, developing a culture means having a tradition that maintains the standards you want to define your program. And you can definitely say that about countries as well. For example, um, a tradition that maintains the standards you want to define your program. If you declare a national language, for example, Switzerland has four, I believe: German, French, or German, French, Italian, and Romansh, I think. And it doesn't mean everyone speaks all four, but the idea is, you know, kind of expect everyone to be multilingual, multicultural to some degree. And um, one of the interesting things to me is we usually don't realize how much culture really goes on all the time. In a basketball program, a tradition that maintains the standards you want to define your program. Well, at Duke, based on the stuff that Coach K has said before, individual relationships, you can see that it's not just about X and O's. I'm sure it's that way about a lot of other programs as well. Probably at Carolina, the Carolina way with Dean Smith. Um, I think Brad Stevens at Butler had that the Butler way. I'm trying to think who else had something specific. I know John Wooden had his style at UCLA. I don't really know. I'm not saying no one else has it, but I'm not really clear on who else has, um, a specific name or something like that. But for the most part, every program has something, and um, for Duke and Coach K, having individual relationships is definitely a big deal. So having a tradition, a culture, to maintain these standards, that helps them create a situation where the players want to have these individual relationships. Another thing Coach K says is culture is established by the people who compose your team and is carried on through those people. In other words, culture can only exist through the relationships among the people who make up your group, those in the back offices and on the front lines. A successful development of culture means that you hear different voices echoing the same message throughout the organization, now, through the history of your program, and into its future. But you cannot merely expect culture to be a natural occurrence. It has to be taught and made a part of your everyday routine. I don't usually read such a large block right there, but it's very clear that Coach K views this as a process, and his, what he's trying to say to budding leaders, aspiring leaders, is make culture something you work at every day. And it really fits with something I heard in, I guess, probably early college. People were talking about stuff, saying what you do when no one is looking is character. And it, it it's really interesting to me that um, it matters what you do when no one's looking. On one hand, you could say, well, does it matter? There's no result, or at least there's no reward to it, or there's no effect to someone seeing me do this. And that could be true, but um, I don't think it's as simple as what if I don't pick up that piece of trash when no one's looking. Um, the best I, the best example I can give actually comes from me in high school. Um, in track, I when I was on junior varsity track. I was primarily a sprinter. I was treated track like my off season for basketball, and get faster and everything. So I always wanted to be able to chase people down in the open court. Fast breaks, hunt them down, basically. And Um, there were, I remember practice, a lot of times at practice, the best athletes would try to skip out early, go home, instead of doing 10 laps, 8. And I always just did them all, not so much out of principle or anything. I just figured, well, I'm not that good. I should probably do the whole workout. And sometimes I noticed sometimes I would be the last person. Even the coaches were gone. I don't know if it was just because the weather was getting bad and I just didn't care about the weather, or maybe I was just that much slower on the workout. I don't think I was, because I wasn't one of the slowest. I wasn't one of the faster guys, but I wasn't the slowest. I didn't take long breaks between the drills or anything. Um, but just there was a couple practices where I remember somehow being the last person. The only thing I can think of is possibly it was just bad weather, so everyone just decided to go back, and I guess the coaches as well. And for whatever reason, I just kept going until I was done. So, um, coach like that put me on varsity, and then I became the slowest person. Just got wrecked. But that's just what happened, and it wasn't even really a culture thing in my mind. It was just coach said do these workouts. I wasn't one of the better runners. I wasn't the absolute worst or anything, but I wasn't one of the best. So why not just do them? So if you translate that mindset into basketball, Coach K starts this essay saying making shots counts, but not as much as the people who make them. And that makes a lot more sense to me, having played basketball, as a basketball player. Um, treating track as my off season, it's a little different. It's a different mindset from most of the track guys, and for me, uh, it makes more sense having this basketball analogy, because for me, it's not just the shot that went in. It's was it did I was it good shot selection? Um, was it from an angle and a range I've practiced? And if not, did I make adjustments? How was my form on the shot? Did I follow through properly? Um, how did I land, for example? Um, did the range feel right coming off? Did the range of the shot? Did the range feel right when the shot came off my fingers? Stuff like that. And it's a whole process. It's not just a simple movement. It's it's a very complex mechanical uh, process for the entire body, because you have to um, you have to bend your knees right. You have to point your toes right. You have to bend your knees right. Then you gotta have the ball in the pocket in the right spot for your whatever your shooting form is. But then ideally, you're coming up, your elbows pointed right, and then when you follow through, you know, the shot's going where you direct it towards, and your eyes seeing where it's supposed to go, and just this whole process. And you could say that's a bit of an individual culture, but I think it's definitely impacted by a team culture, a group culture, because everyone is ideally working to get better. So, of course, you could say that for me, I might be an extension of the Duke culture even before I got to Duke, and various things like that, in the sense that um, I saw the culture there, or I saw the culture somewhere, and I liked it, and I mixed and matched. I borrowed from here and there, and came up with these principles that guided me as a basketball player, as a track runner, or as a sprinter, stuff like that. And it, you know, it just sounds like one of those things where um, when you say you study this, you're a disciple of that. just sounds like one of those things where you kind of wonder how connected to that program or philosophy can you really be when you're not there. But I guess that's how culture is. Um, it's not bound to one person or one group. It's basically if you like it, you enjoy it, you start to learn from it. Uh, you start to aspire to the same standards that that culture expects for itself. And it's interesting in basketball, college basketball actually. I'm not as clear on NBA basketball, but I know for college basketball, because of the whole one and done trend, it's been much harder for coaches to create this continuum of culture. But for example, with Coach K, you can see the culture from guys like Gene Banks and um, from Coach K's first team, Gene Banks and Dog. um, I think the biggest thing is they were the first captains for Coach K. I remember Kenny Denard, uh, well, Dog, that's his nickname. I guess I only mentioned him in briefly in one previous video, but to clarify, Gene Banks and Kenny Denard, known as Dog, they were the captains for Coach K's first team. They weren't Coach K's recruits, but the culture that they had, they helped pass it down to the new kids. And at the end of the essay, Coach K actually traces this a bit. He talks about how in the 1986 season, when the class of '86, so guys like Johnny Dawkins, Mark Allery, Jay Billis, I want to say Phil Henderson was also in '86. I keep thinking '87. I know Tommy Amaker is 87, and then he says that here, my starting backcourt of Johnny Dawkins, a senior, and Tommy Amaker, a junior, would completely dominate our second team. Quinn Snyder was a freshman on that second unit and would leave a number of practices feeling down and defeated. So, a bit of crisis management there, as upperclassmen Johnny and Tommy would take Quinn off to the side and tell him about when they had gone through those experiences as well. It was all part of developing as an individual player and as a part of the Duke basketball culture. Essentially reminding Quinn, keep working hard, keep listening to the coach, things will work out for you. And eventually Quinn became one of the captains and led Duke to the 1989 Final Four. And he spent a lot of his time passing the same lessons on to Christian Laettner, who was a freshman that year. And then we all know Christian Laettner, 4 Final Fours, 3 championship games, won the last 2, repeated, hit the shot, considered probably at least top 5 in terms of the greatest college basketball players. But even then, he was passing on to Bobby Hurley, Grant Hill, and from there to Jeff Capel, to Trajan Langdon, to Nate James, Chris Carrawell, Shane Battier, to Chris Duhon, to JJ Redick, to I guess guys like Dave McClure, uh, DeMarcus Nelson, and then I'm trying to think who was in order by year, because I'm pretty sure DeMarcus Nelson was just a year above me, and then my year, guys like Greg Paulus, Josh McRoberts, Martinez Potsus, Jordan Davidson, and then from there, John Shire, Brian Zubek, Lance Thomas, Kyle Singler, Nolan Smith, and then you get into the one and done era, guys like Kyrie, Austin Rivers, Jabari Parker, and it's interesting because during this time we had someone called Quinn Cook, who when he became the captain, he stepped up and became a great big brother to the freshmen for that year. Tyus Jones, Julio Okafor, Justice Winslow, Grayson Allen, and that resulted in the 2015 championship. And I skipped over the 2010 championship, but what I was trying to get at is even with the one and dones, you can still create that culture. And that culture continues to today. We still have a lot of one and dones at Duke, but we still have a lot of 4-year seniors. After I think next in after the championship, we had guys like Brandon Ingram, Jason Tatum. I honestly don't remember the order, but you know, we just had guys like Justin Robinson, Javin DeLaurier, and Jack White, as our seniors, and even Trey Jones, the younger brother of Tyus Jones, as a sophomore, as a returning point guard. He was able to pass on a lot of culture that he learned because Coach K has developed a culture that he then evolved to be able to teach these one and done players faster. And a lot of these Duke players, they go to the NBA and they're able to connect with the older guys. For example, JJ Redick played 4 years. Zion Williamson played 1 year, but they can still connect because that culture of brotherhood is there. And Coach K has said many times that Kyrie is a big proponent of that. So definitely props to Kyrie. Um, you know, playing his part in helping create and propagate that culture. And the start of all this, a lot of it is Coach K says when they recruit players, they don't just look at the kids' athletic ability, the stats, grades, but also how they interact with classmates, parents, other people in their community. And so one of Coach K's favorite things is seeing, they come by for a home visit and the player has his best friend with him. Someone maybe doesn't even play basketball. And it shows that at a young age, these players understand it's more than just the sport. It's a life full of many things, and they're willing to share this life with others. Um, Coach K calls it an indication that he is willing to look beyond himself and become a part of something greater. And he goes on to say, culture is passing on the values and teaching the standards that you have learned as an upperclassman to the young players on the team. And that's very true, even as a non-athlete in college. I tried to pass on the lessons I learned first 2 years at Duke. My junior year, my senior year, I tried to pass them on to the incoming kids, freshmen and sophomores, and just in general, if there's any one area that I'm more experienced, I try to pass on what experience I already have, so that person can learn from my previous experience, whether it was 3 years ago and I'm an expert, or I just heard about it yesterday, but this person missed that. In general, just being able to say, here's something I know, and I'm trying to pass it on. And a lot of it is collective responsibility and care, and just in general trying to build others up. So even in the Harvard Business School online program I did, I try to, in my courses, I tried to bring that mindset, that culture in, and to some degree at least. It's a little harder online, and I'm terrible at communicating online. And I got to be in person, but where I can't feed off that energy and momentum, I can at least try to inject elements of that culture, saying, "Hey, I'm gonna help out, not because you asked me to or because I'm better, but just if there's someone I can help, I definitely want to help." And it's just one of those things that I try. I in college I tried to internalize it. I try to remind myself regularly that if there's some way I can impact others and help them out, then why not do that? And I think that plays a big role in why in basketball, I very rarely yell at any teammates during a game. If they make a mistake or they cut, or I guess if they cut in and back out when they should have cut all the way through, I'll go up and say, hey, next time, cut all the way through. I'll get the ball to you. I'll make it clear to these guys. You don't have to try to get fancy. If you have an opening, you cut. I'll do my best to get the ball to you. And HBS online, just in general, if there's someone I can help out, step in and help them out. At Duke, just mentoring others whenever possible. And with Tech Tree Root, creating all these hackathons, tech events to help educate everyone. Just in general, creating hackathons throughout the South Central U.S., an area that doesn't have the same opportunities for tech education, creating that environment and helping create opportunities that only usually, until the end of 2016, really only existed on the coasts, where now I can say, I played a role in shaping this national landscape by adding a region, creating and adding this region, and by making it a part of what's going on in California, the East Coast, and to a lesser extent, also the Midwest, to a lesser extent, and just helping create this environment where even students in this area have the same opportunities that a lot of kids would only have in, say, the DC area, the Northeast, California, Seattle, Chicago. Just in general, I think that's just something I try to always incorporate. If there's ever someone who needs help, I step in and help. If someone might need some encouragement, or just I need to show someone that someone cares about them, then might as well be me. Next man up. It is just definitely something that comes from basketball. If there's an open guy, don't yell at teammates to cover that person right away. Go cover that person, help out, but then hold them accountable and say someone's got to defend this guy. It can't be me all the time. I'll help out, but as a team, you got to cover your guy. I'll cover my guy, but then that's play help defense when necessary. That's called screens. It's not just it's not just showing that I care. It's also saying, hey, I called the screen. Now it's your responsibility to get around it and still guard that person. Or just in general, showing the awareness and displaying that awareness and conveying it to the rest of the team. A lot of times, having that culture, communicating to others what's going on, is so important in basketball, and I try to bring that into everyday life. So, yeah, it's just crazy. These words just kind of flow straight into each other. I don't know if I mean to or not, but just everything. Having the courage to step up and take leadership. During a crisis, leading people through, and through that you build a culture that embraces these opportunities and learns the lessons to become dependable. The word for tomorrow is dependability. So I don't know. Either Coach K is just brilliant at taking alphabetical words and flowing them together, or maybe just he did a great job of picking 40 words that tie in so cohesively. But whatever the case is, tomorrow will be day 13. The word will be dependability. So everyone take it easy.